Hello, Ron McClung here, once again for RPGaDay 2018 edition. Didn't do all that I wanted to do with the channel. Life changed for me. New boss at work, new responsibilities. Overall for the better, but made things busier. Left little time to edit these videos and get them up on the site. But I'm going to try to get more done with RPGaDay this year. Didn't start out so good because I missed the first week. I was on vacation, and I will go back and do those at the end, so like I did last year. So for August 6th, it is a bunch of how questions. And the first one is, how can players make a world seem more real? And the more and more I do these, the more and more I realize how honestly limited I have made my experience. I was always into the lesser popular games, although I did play D&D off and on. I mostly played science fiction, and very few really embrace science fiction like I do, or science fantasy. The bulk of my time running games was either Star Frontiers or Star Wars, but I did a lot of other things as well. So it's difficult for anybody to make those games more real, because if you make them too real, they tend to be boring. You need to make them more epic, and sometimes in a lot of cases, much like Star Wars and even Star Frontiers, ignore certain realities of science, physics. It's unfortunate, but space has never been a place, or is not a place very friendly to humanity. In fact, it just seems like it was specifically designed to keep us out. But we have this dream of going out there one way or another, despite the fact that we've discovered that it alters DNA, even just in low orbit. But to answer it in a generic term, rather than specific to what I run, I think that to make it more real, a player needs to invest themselves in some aspect of the game. I've had cases where players just jump right in and don't know anything about the background. And that may be why I ran, for the most part, games that were based on licenses, like shows and movies, Star Wars, Babylon 5. I'm even running Star Trek now, off and on. And people can just relate to that. Cthulhu, even. People can relate to that, can already know something up front because either they watched the show, read the books, or at least somewhat familiar with the background. So a lot of the work has been done for me. It's really, really hard to get anybody invested in a game setting that they're not 100% either familiar with or invested in some way, through books or whatever. I'm about to enter into a campaign that I know people are not going to be able to be 100% invested in, because it is a merging of a lot of the settings I've dealt with in the past, Star Frontiers being the dominant one, and it's heavily customized and for Savage Worlds. But I relate it back to like the last Parsec, because that's basically a love letter to Star Frontiers. And I hope that they can grasp some of it. And I've been doing a lot of writing, putting that information out on my website so that at least the players can make an effort to read and get that piece that they can invest in. And that's what it takes, is make it real to them and give them a piece of that universe. The GM should always give them a piece of that universe and tell an individual story while telling overall an epic story with the group. You also have some sub-stories. And I've talked about this before, where backgrounds are important, and hooking the player or the player character into the setting and the campaign overall. So what they can do in return is invest their time in understanding that aspect of their piece of the universe. and make it more real to them. But it's kind of a negotiated thing, because they need to initiate, the player needs to initiate that piece. You can't just, the GM can't just force this chunk of story onto them and they don't know anything about it. Let them create, just a generic idea. Then you map that idea around concepts you already know that are in the setting. And then it becomes really closer and closer to being more and more real as time goes on. I've had, more times than not, it's been successful. But I've had some failures because I didn't quite understand the concept of what the player wanted out of that storyline. One of them goes back to a friend of mine, John, that had a character concept that was sort of a breaching Marine. I kept on going down roads of just the concept of a Marine and the Brotherhood, and he just didn't want to go that route. He kind of got frustrated with me at that time. We had a talk later, and we got an understanding of where I was going, but I wanted to understand where he wanted to go, and he had more opportunities to actually act as a breaching Marine and all this other stuff. You've got to have a kind of a mutual agreement of what these concepts and these stories, and to find out what makes the player tick, and then give them that piece, and then they run with it, and it becomes part of the story, part of the overall experience. And then that, in turn, makes the setting more real, in my opinion. Real is definitely a funny term. We're dealing with imagination, things of imagination. I'm dealing with stuff like Flash Gordon and Star Wars, like Shatter Zone, and horror like Call of Cthulhu and Dark Conspiracy. All of those had aspects of it that we could relate to, but also aspects of it that are just way out there. Flash Gordon, it's more of a fantasy, but I just love that setting. Comics and the serials were just such a basis for so much, everything else. But it's silly in a lot of ways. It ignores a lot of physics, so it's hard to make it real. But it's possible. It's real. To what degree of real is the question. And one of the benefits of Flash Gordon is you get bonuses if you run around nothing but a Speedo, called No Armor Hero or something like that. Is that real? No, but it's fun and it's a great game mechanic, and it makes it feel Flash Gordon. So if it's Flash Gordon, then it's real. It's real within the context of Flash Gordon. But is it real? No. So a lot of game mechanics can also do that, much like that example. And players embracing those game mechanics to help tell a story. That's what all game mechanics should do, in my opinion. How can they make it more real? I think one thing that and especially in the science fiction side of things, where fantasy kind of avoids all of this by saying, well, it's magic. And that's kind of why I guess fantasy is so easy and much more popular. Science fiction has a perceived limitation with science. So what science are we going to limit ourselves with this time? I ran into this with the various science fiction games I ran, or science fantasy. So you have to take the context of the genre. We played Shadow Zone, which was a lot more hard science fiction, kind of a dark meteor traveler in a sense. We used a lot of real science, but every player has a sense of reality in that sense. And it may be based on their understanding of science, it may be based on their ignorance of science or physics. But for me, it's real when we try to at least obey the basic tenets of physics and the realities of space. I like to make space difficult. But then again, I have a lot of those tropes that allow me to do it's just magic. You use ancient alien technology or psychic-based technology. Allows you to do a whole lot of stuff. So science fiction can be much like fantasy if you tweak it enough, and the players enjoy it that much better. I mean, they invest it that much. They invest into it just like they would invest in a fantasy, and they find that science fiction and fantasy are not that much different. So that's about it for day 6. Tomorrow we'll deal with day 7. Hope that was insightful or entertaining or somewhere in between. Until next time, seek the wolf in thyself.